Hey guys, I'm going to walk you through making a movable ornament or a movable keychain. So I made kind of a little Christmas, and what's kind of cool about this is all of these rings kind of spin in that. So you don't have to make it Christmas related. You can put any shape you want here in the middle. I just kind of did the Christmas tree as that starting example. So kind of a cool way we can put a chain through this. You can make it into a keychain. So this is me starter. I am going to encourage you to kind of follow along and make it exactly how I have for this one. Obviously, what you put in the middle, you can do differently. But then once you've completed this project, if you want to try to apply that to different shapes, so making instead of a circle out here, if you wanted it to be more of a square or triangle, hexagon, something, you could apply similar aspects to creating your own item as you would making this one. So this is probably going to be a pretty detailed, somewhat longer video. So if you don't finish it in one sitting, just kind of look at the time so that you remember where you're at. So the next day when you start to make it again, you can remember where to start the video from. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a new 3D design here in TinkerCAD. As always, I encourage you guys to name your files as soon as you come in. So don't leave it kind of the random TinkerCAD name. Let's go ahead and change. And for my students, I always make you start with your initials and then whatever your class period is. And then what is it? So I'm going to call this my movable keychain or movable ornament, whatever you would like for that. The next thing we need to do is we need to edit our settings. So I've already have some preset. Yours might come in look a little differently, but if we click the settings, I always get it backwards, kind of right over here next to me, that's where we can make sure that we're in it right. For this project, I do want you in millimeters. And since we have Dremel 3D 40s printers, we're going to just leave it that size. It makes it easier when we go and try to print that later on. If you ever want to edit your zoom in or zoom out settings or other things, you can do that here. But once we have those in, I'm going to go ahead and click the X. You should see really small, so if I kind of zoom in here, really little boxes, that's a good hint that we're in millimeters and not in inches. So the first thing we're going to do, and you're going to follow on exactly with me, is I would like you to pull an orange cylinder onto your work plane. Whenever you bring a shape in, you kind of get this options menu here. We don't always do different things with it. This time we are going to go to the sides and we're going to move that sides up as high as you can. Basically what that does, if I zoom in on my shape, the less sides basically means it has kind of more of these straight edges. So since we want ours to be quite round, if we go up, it's going to have 64 sides, which means those little straightways are, there's more of them, so you get more of a curved shape to it. So make your sides up to 64, and then we are going to make this cylinder 50 by 50. So if I click the corner here, you could click and drag. I think it's easier to type. I'm going to type in 50, hit enter, and then I'll have to slide it over and do the same on the other side. So do this one as 50 as well. I believe if you hold shift, sometimes that changes both of them at the same time. And then we are going to make this 5 millimeters tall. So clicking on this white square in the middle here, I'm going to go ahead and type 5 in for that one. So double check 50 by 50, and then it's 5 tall. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out. We're going to use lots of our different kind of view features here. I like using that F button to give me that nice view of it. I'm going to copy and paste this. So I'm going to do a Control C, Control V. So it slides over. Hit F, so I'm looking at that one. I'm then going to make this one into a hole, and then we're going to resize it. So the size for your hole is going to be 45 by 45. Since we copy and pasted, it already has those 64 sides. It's already 5 tall. So I can just come here and I'm going to see if the holding shift works and type in, oh, it doesn't work. So 45 and then hit enter, and I'm gonna have to enter it over there. So I was wrong. I know there is a trick to get both of those changed. I apologize. I don't know that right now. So our solid is 50 by 50. Our hole is 45 by 45. And then I'm going to zoom out because the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to copy. I'm going to select both of those shapes. So draw a box around both. I'm going to copy and paste both of those shapes. And then I'm going to move them kind of down this way. So if your first set of shapes isn't up towards the top of that, you'll want to move that up. I'm going to take the next two, kind of move them underneath. Again, hitting the F button gives me a nice, easy view of that. So now we're going to change the size of both of these pieces one at a time. So I'm going to kind of just select off of those. I'm going to click onto my solid. We need to make this one 43.5 by 43.5. So 43.5, enter. Go type the other one, 43.5, enter. And so 43.5 for both of those. And then for the whole, we're going to make the whole 38.5 by 38.5. So click my corner, type in 38.5, enter, 38.5, enter. Okay, let's copy and paste both of those. So select both, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. Them underneath, hit F so I get a good view. Select off. For this one, we're going to make our solid 37 by 37. So click the corner, 37, enter, 37, enter. And then I'm going to make my whole 32 by 32. 32, enter, 32, enter. Okay, let's copy and paste one more time. Change my view here a little bit. So if I select both those, Control C, Control V, slide those down, hit the F button, give it a little more space. This time, our solid is going to be 30 and a half, 30.5 by 30 and a half. And our whole is going to be 25 and a half by 25 and a half. Okay, great. I've got all those together. Now we're going to go through and we are going to group. We're going to align, or TinkerCAD calls it array, each solid with its whole, and then we're going to group them. So I'm going to go back up to the beginning. So since I'm using a mouse, if I click down on my center scroll wheel, I can click and drag with that center scroll wheel, and it allows me to kind of change my view. Whereas that right click tilts the view. So if you're trying to get up towards these top ones, right now I can't see it. I'm going to click and drag that center scroll wheel. I'm going to select just those two shapes up here at the top. And then we're going to go over to our array or our align, which is kind of in that top menu near the right. When you click this is when you get all those black dots. We are going to center array on our X and our Y. So for my side to side, which is our X, I'm going to click the center one there. And then for the center for my Y, which is that front to back, I'm going to click that one as well. What you should see is your whole should be inside of your solid. So if you've kept everything the same color, you should see that orange ring going around. And then I'm just going ahead and group these. We are essentially making these oversized rings of a specific width, just like that. Click and hold down my center scroll wheel. We are going to do that exact same thing to the other three pairs. So I'm going to select just the next two. I'm going to go to my align, center my X, the dot in the middle, center my Y, and group. Slide down my screen, select the next two. Remember, you don't have to draw the box completely around them. Anything that's inside of your select box will be selected. Align, center my X, center my Y, group. And last but not least, the last two, center X, center Y, group. Okay, so if I zoom out and kind of change my view here, you'll see we have these 4 rings. Okay, now we are going to align all 4 of these rings with each other. So if I draw a box around all of them, to select all of them, go to my align. I'm going to center them on my X and center them on my Y. Hit my F key, or maybe select off, hit that F button to get a nice view. Change my view here, and what you should see, oops, didn't mean to do that, okay, is you have 4 rings, and if I zoom way in on them, you can see how they do have kind of separation between them. Not much, just a little tiny bit, enough that it allows it to move. So if I zoom out, kind of change that view, hit F, you'll see you should have those 4 rings. At this point, it's a good point to check in. If yours does not look like mine, you might want to go back, maybe redo some of those steps, or make sure your sizing was correct. Okay, from here, we are going to add another cylinder to our page. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to select my cylinder. I am going to make this again with the sides of 64. Okay, we want it to be as round as possible. Change my view slightly. We are going to make this into a hole. Probably could have dragged out a whole cylinder. So let's make that a hole. And then we are going to make it 4 by 4 wide and long, and then 45 tall. So 4 wide, which makes it pretty small, 4 long, and then going up here to the top and getting to 45. Okay, if you ever can't see something, remember you can always kind of move that shape or change your view, whatever helps. I'm going to copy and paste that cylinder. That's just kind of a shortcut so you don't have to redo all of your settings again. And we're going to make it solid now. So we made the hole first because the second one you're going to have, it's going to be the cylinder that kind of runs through the middle shape. So we need the hole bigger so that the cylinder fits in it. So for this solid one, we are going to make it 3 by 3 by 64. So I'm going to click this one. I'm going to make it 3 by 3 and make it 45 tall. It already is 45 tall. Okay, the next thing to do is we need to rotate these and lower them down to our work plane. So I'm going to change my view slightly so that I can select both of them at the same time. I think it's easier just to rotate them at the same time. And then you might have to change your view, which again is if you kind of right click on your mouse and then click and drag, that's how you can change your view. Or you can come up to this box and click and drag as well. So by changing your view, you're going to start to see these curvy arrows show up. So I need to rotate it because I want these cylinders basically laying on the work plane. So I'm going to click. I'm going to hold shift. What you'll notice is before I hold shift, there's a whole bunch of lines here. When I hold shift, it reduces how many lines there are, and that just makes it easier to get to 90. Otherwise, if depending on where you're at, you might get close but not quite. The big thing when rotating in TinkerCAD is if you don't get exactly what you want the first time, I would recommend doing a Control Z and then doing it over again. So if I was rotating these, let's say, and coming down here and I maybe got 89 instead of 90, what's going to happen is they're going to be a little angled, and I don't want that. So I'm going to do a Control Z, and I would just try it again, maybe holding that Shift button to get exactly 90. And then if we hit the D button, that means down to the work plane. So if I just hit the letter D, it pushed them down to the bottom, and then I'm going to select off of them. So we are going to group our hole first. So we're going to make the hole first. So that means I need to come back here. I think I missed this before, so let's do this now. Okay, let's select this first item here. Yep. And so I have my 4 rings. I want to group all of those rings together so that they're all kind of one shape in there. And then I'm going to select my hole. I'm going to hold shift and select all of my rings. And let's align these. So I'm going to align on my X, align on my Y. And this time I'm going to change my view. We are going to come here. This is important that you don't miss this one as well. We need to align on our Z. Okay, so X, Y, and Z. If you don't see your Z, it's because you're too up above and you can't see those dots. So I changed my view here, and I'm going to make sure I select this middle align as well. And what that does is it puts your hole perfectly in the middle where we want it. We can go ahead and group these together just so that it makes that hole first. Okay. And then I'm going to select my solid cylinder still off to the side and all of those rings. And we are going to do the same alignment. So I'm going to align on my X, align on my Y, and then don't forget to align on your Z. So all of those middle dots are selected. If I zoom way in, what you'll see is that this cylinder is perfectly in that hole, which is exactly what we want. I can go ahead and group these together. Right. Yes, group those together. Just double checking. I don't want to give you guys a bad tutorial for this one. So from here, we are going to add the kind of where we would attach our keychain to, or if you're going to hang this wherever your hook for the Christmas tree. We are going to use the tube shape. So if you come here, move myself away so I'm not in there. I'm in my basic shapes. I'm going to scroll down and find this orange tube. Okay, I'm drag that out to my work plane. For this one, we are going to make it 20 by 20 by 5 tall. So I'm going to click my corner. It is 20 by 20, so I just need to come here and change my height. So it is 5 tall. And we are going to come over to the options, and we're going to make this a wall thickness of 3. So you can click and drag or just type it in. I think it's easier to type it in. Oops, but don't do that. Control Z it out. Okay, so come here. I'm going to type in 3 and enter. You should see that change, that thickness matches there. Okay, the next step with this ring is we don't need the full circle because we only need this kind of top part here, and then it attaches at little parts. So I'm going to get a cube hole, and this one doesn't have to be a specific size. We are just using the hole to cut out part of that ring. So what you'll see, and if I change my view so I'm a little bit more up above, that my hole is covering about half of this ring, because then I'm going to select both of them, and you can do that, hold shift and select your second item. And then I'm going to group these together, which is going to cut off the bottom part of the ring. And that's exactly what I wanted, because now when I move this up this way, I want it to kind of overlap with that outside ring. I don't need to group these quite yet, but now I've created a place where I can attach string, keychain, etc. to this. Okay, so that was a tube, 20 by 20 by 5, thickness of 3, and then we just used a hole to cut the bottom half of it off. This next step is up to you. This is where you're going to decide what do you want in the middle of your design. So for my example here, I put a Christmas tree. If you want to kind of scroll through the different shapes, you could put one of these stars. There's a heart. There's kind of a diamond sort of shape. If you wanted to venture into some of these other spots, you could use something else from in here. You in basic shapes, if you maybe want initials or letters, you can do that. You want to be careful with typing text though, because anything that's not attached to each other will fall off. That's how that 3D printing part works. So if I'm going to do text, I might just put an M for Marcuson. Okay, so if I kind of change out my text here, see if I can move my camera. Sometimes it's hard when you're trying to work with different programs here. There we go. It doesn't want to let me move it. Okay, so I guess I'm going to stay on the screen, but it can change the text right here. So I'm going to change this to a capital M, and then I can resize it so that it'll fit. I don't know what's going on. My laptop is, there we go. Okay, get that into a capital M. I can drag that in here. The big thing is we don't actually want it touching the rings, because then the rings won't be able to rotate. So as long as whatever you put in there doesn't touch the rings, you're fine. I do want it cutting across this cylinder in the middle so that it is attached to something and doesn't just fall out. If I change my view here, you can tell my M is far too tall, so I'm going to shrink this down, or whatever shape you've chosen, to a height of 5, since everything else is a height of 5. You can see it all kind of works in there. And then the last step here is going to be to group everything together and double check it, so giving it that big scan around. So if I zoom in on my M, big thing I want to make sure is that it's not going to end up attached to that ring, because then the ring wouldn't be able to move. So mine looks pretty good. It gets kind of close over here, but they are separated, so that should be fine. One thing I noticed is that my M is not centered, and if that bothers you, then maybe we want to fix that. So I can ungroup it, and then I might just select and see if I arrow over. Ooh, that looks pretty good because it's nice and centered. Double check that it's not touching that middle ring, so we're good there. Now I'm going to group it together, and we should be able to download and print this. So one reason we know that this will work, it's print in place, and that it should be able to move, is when you look at where the cylinder cuts through, there's always kind of a hole around the cylinder. Now, it's not a very big hole. It won't need supports to fill it, but it's just enough to allow that movement. So that's my design for this one. I've already named it, so we're good there. I'm going to click on export. We are going to export as an STL. And then if you have your downloads popping up, yep, there it is. It comes down to the bottom of my screen. I can now go add that into Google Classroom where we submit our 3D print items, and then I can sign up on the sheet so that I get it printed out the color that I want it. If you have any questions, just let me know or ask a friend. Thanks for watching.